In this video, we'll see how to add and subtract with fractions. So a couple things to remember and review when we're subtracting a fraction from a whole number. All right, 6.5, we all know that, minus a half, we all know that is going to be 5.5. But just let's consider how we can show how we get that number. 6, right? If we want to borrow from the 6, we could rewrite 6 as 5 and 2 halves. The reason I'm choosing 2 as my denominator is because it's the same denominator that I'm using to subtract. And then if I take 5 and 2 halves minus a half, that gives me 5.5. So I want to do the same thing here. If I have 6 minus 5/9, right, I'm going to borrow one whole from the 6, make that 6 a 5, and then I'm going to write that 1 as a 9/9. Again, I'm choosing 9 because that's my denominator in the fraction that I'm using to subtract. So 5 and 9/9 minus 5/9 is going to be 5 and 4/9. This problem here, 6 plus negative 3/11, right? I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to borrow one from the 6 and make it a 5. Now I'm going to use 11 as my denominator. So 11/11 is that whole that I borrowed. Then I'm going to add a negative 3/11 to that. 5 and 11/11 plus negative 3/11 is just 5 and 8/11. If you're noticing here that all you're really doing is subtracting the denominator and the numerator here, and then decreasing by 1, that is exactly what's happening. All right, so now if I have mixed numbers, I want to make sure I rewrite each fraction with the least common denominator. I'm going to add and subtract the numerators and whole numbers. And sometimes it's helpful to think about them as separate pieces, which we'll look at in a second. And then I'm going to reduce and rename if necessary. So let's look at this first sample problem. I've got 8 and 5/6 plus 4 and 7/8. The least common denominator for these is going to be 24. So I'm going to have 6 times 4 is 24, 5 times 4 is 20, plus 4, and 8 times 3 is 24, 7 times 3 is 21. All right, so I want to just think about these separately. I'm going to think about the whole numbers. 8 plus 4, that gives me 12. And then 20 24ths plus 21 24ths. That is going to give me 41 24ths. So this improper fraction here. What's 41 24ths really equal to as a mixed number? Well, 24 is going to go into 41 one time, with 17 24ths left over. So when I add my whole numbers here and what I got from adding my fractions together, I'm going to get 13 and 17 24ths. All right, let's look at the same problem, except with subtraction. So this will be 8 and 20 24ths minus 4 and 21 24ths. And I want to think about these separately, so I'm going to take 8 minus 4, that's 4, and then 20 24ths minus 21 24ths. Well, 20 minus 21, that's a negative 1 24th. Well, what do I get when I take a positive 4 and I add a negative 1 24th to that? Recall from the previous page, that's going to give us a 3, right? Because 4 is equal to 3 and 24 24ths. And I'm just going to subtract 1 from the numerator, 3 and 23 24ths. All right, here are a couple problems for you to practice on your own. I have 3 1/3 plus a negative 7 3/8. LCD is going to be 24, so this is going to be 3 and 8 24ths. And I'm just going to simplify this a little bit. Minus, adding a negative, the same thing as subtracting. Minus 7 and 9 24ths. Okay, so then I'm going to take my whole numbers. 3 minus 7, that's a negative 4. 8 24ths minus 9 24ths, that's a negative 1 24th. Well, what am I going to get when I subtract negative 4 minus 1 24th? The answer is going to be a negative 4 and 1 24th. And finally, let's take a look at this last one here. 9 and 6, the LCD is going to be 18, so I've got 6 and 14 eighteenths minus a negative, so I'm going to rewrite that as plus 3 and 15 eighteenths. 6 plus 3, that gives me 9. 14 eighteenths plus 15 eighteenths, that gives me 29 eighteenths. And 29 eighteenths is really 1 and 11 eighteenths. So when I add 1 and 11 eighteenths and 9, I get 10 and 11 eighteenths. And that's how we add and subtract fractions.